Is liberty dying where you live? Escape to Keene at freekeene.com.
So we are going to continue in the technological vein here with the Bitcoin panel. And there has been, if our panelists would go ahead and take the stage, go right ahead. We're going to get the ball rolling. Bitcoin's been definitely a buzzword throughout the convention. There's been a lot of talk about Bitcoin. Some people are brand new to Bitcoins. I know Russell Canning was set up earlier this weekend by Derek J. Derek J kind of showed him the ropes, and I'm sure Russell's not the only one who's been introduced to the use of Bitcoin this weekend. It's kind of taken the Liberty movement by storm within the last couple years. Porcupine Freedom Festival has become probably the most Bitcoin prolific event in the world. At least that's what I've been made to understand. The guy from Bitcoin Magazine was at the Porcupine Freedom Festival this year. And the Liberty community, there's a very regular meetup in Manchester that's been going on for over a year now, as I understand it. And as I said, we've got one happening in Keene as well. So the more technological wizards we can get here, the better off we're going to be. And Bitcoin, I think, is a key component. That's why I thought it deserved its own panel here. And who better to host that than one of the hosts of Let's Talk Bitcoin? Stephanie Murphy is here, and she's also one of the hosts of Free Talk Live. She'll be on Free Talk Live tonight from 7 to 10 at night Eastern. And speaking of tech, you can tune it in on 102.3. Here in Keene. If you're in North Keene, it's 102.5, and of course online anytime at lrn.fm and freetalklive.com. Stephanie is also a doctor, not a Bitcoin doctor, but anyway, thanks for being here, Stephanie.
Thank you so much, Ian. I wish I was a Bitcoin doctor. That would be so cool. Can I get a PhD in Bitcoin? Anyway, thank you so much for coming to this panel. We're doing the Bitcoin panel now, and I am really excited about this because Bitcoin is one of my favorite things, right? It's that song, right? These are a few of my favorite things, encryption and free state.
Karaoke was last night.
Okay, so we're going to get started here. We've got some great panelists. I am Stephanie Murphy. As Ian mentioned, I am a podcast host, a talk show host. I host a show called Let's Talk Bitcoin, and you can find it at letstalkbitcoin.com, twice weekly show about all things cryptocurrency. I also host my own show, Pork Therapy, which is a pro-freedom kind of relationship talk show, and I'm a host of Free Talk Live, which you can hear me later tonight at freetalklive.com and on the radio here in Keene. And so I'd like to have all the panelists introduce themselves. Let's start out with George Mandrik.
Hi guys, I'm Mandrik. I've been involved in Bitcoin for the past couple years. I run Mandrik.com. It's a website where I sell my baklava online, and it's really just something I do for fun on the side. Right now I'm mainly involved with Blockchain.info. I'm the customer relations manager, so I handle pretty much anything technically related. People write in about any types of questions they have. I handle all the social media aspects and just whatever else. There's only about 4 of us right now involved with the company, and it's just kind of like, hey, what can you do today to help out? So it's pretty exciting, and if you're really into Bitcoin, it's awesome just being involved with a company like that. I spent 3 months with BitInstant as well, doing support issues, and that was also a really cool experience. So I've only really been involved in the Bitcoin industry as far as working in the industry for about 6 months, but I guess that's a pretty long time for
But you've been accepting Bitcoin at your business for more than that, right?
For 2 years now, about 2 years.
That's longer than the CEOs of a lot of Bitcoin companies, so there you go. So, Matthew?
My name is Matthew Carano. My wife Barbara and I own a Brazilian cafe in Newmarket, New Hampshire, which is on the seacoast, town of about 9,000. And we as a restaurant accept Bitcoin. We started doing so a little over a year ago. I was actually first introduced to Bitcoin on a television program, and I don't even remember what the hell it was, but it showed people mining Bitcoin, and I became interested, but I didn't get it until at a Liberty meetup maybe 2 years ago now. I saw Eric Voorhees speak about it, got more interested, and we started accepting it. So that's me.
Great. And JJ?
Hello, I'm JJ, and I live in Manchester. I have a podcast as well, Neocash Radio. Basically, it talks about anything that isn't a fiat currency, and obviously Bitcoin falls into that category. I also manage the club in Manchester called The Quill, and we do have a lot of Bitcoin dealings there. And
shady.
It's good stuff. Also, there's a really strong community in Manchester with a lot of Bitcoin businesses, and I guess the pinnacle of which is the Lamasu Bitcoin Ventures, the guys making the Bitcoin ATM. I'm sorry, the Bitcoin machine. It's not an ATM. So I think I'm the least qualified here, but I'm really good with a microphone. So
you are totally qualified. Actually, I did ask some of the guys from Lamasu to be here today, but they were busy jet setting around the world promoting their projects. So, but we definitely acknowledge them too. So, okay, I know that there are some people in the crowd today who don't really know that much about Bitcoin. Like, this might be one of the first times they're hearing about it, or they're just not that familiar with it. We're kind of old hat. We've been here for a couple years in New Hampshire, at least, knowing about Bitcoin and using it. But could you each just give like a few sentence explanation for somebody who really isn't familiar? What is Bitcoin and why should they care? Just a quick one. We won't spend too much time on this.
Well, Bitcoin is the free market solution to liberty and peace, I think. I think it's a way to circumvent the dollar, which is control over every transaction you make, and it subverts the government. It allows you true freedom, limited anonymity, and it's putting the power of money back in your hands.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would just say that it's a digital currency, pseudo-anonymous in that the transactions, it's easier to control from transaction point your anonymity, but the actual transactions, I don't know if I'm explaining this right, are open to the public to view. So you can see that money is taking place, is transacting, but you can't necessarily see who's on either side of that. So.
Yeah, I look at it as a way to store your wealth, transport your wealth, and spend your wealth outside of any government, not just the dollar, any government, anywhere in the world. There's places everywhere around this globe now that are accepting Bitcoin, and it's growing every day. So for me, it's just there's no other currency like that. I mean, it's just if you want to go to Europe on vacation, you want to get euros, you got to go through exchanges and things like that. With Bitcoin, you can get on a plane and you can go anywhere that you know that. I mean, you have to look, obviously, but that's changing. But it's a way to use this currency internationally, instant transactions. It's amazing.
Yeah, my favorite way personally to explain Bitcoin to someone who's not too familiar with it is imagine if you took some gold and you added like one of those teleporters from Star Trek where you can beam it up anywhere. And so now you have the ability to take a piece of gold and break it down into as many smaller pieces as you want, put the pieces back together, and send it anywhere in the world. And it's it's not costly at all to send it anywhere. So now suddenly you have a form of money that's easily divisible, that's easily transportable, and that holds its value. And I think those are the three characteristics that Plato said are what constitutes money. So there you go. A lot of Austrian economics people like to talk about gold and silver and precious metals as having those characteristics and therefore being good forms of money. But Bitcoin, I think, is an improvement on all of those. And as you mentioned, it's decentralized. There's no central authority that issues Bitcoin. It's part of a network of peer-to-peer connections among computers. They exist on the internet. It's very much a digital phenomenon. So, okay, you kind of answered this in your introduction, but like, how did you first get interested in Bitcoin? Like, tell me your Bitcoin virginity stories.
So for me, I first got involved. I heard about it on Free Talk Live, but it sounded kind of shady to me. This guy named Roger.
Sounded shady.
Yeah. This guy named Roger Ver reached out to me a couple years ago. He's pretty big in the Bitcoin world, and he reached out to me because he heard one of my advertisements on Wheels Off Liberty, the greatest liberty podcast ever. But he reached out to me. He heard an ad there, and he said, "Hey, you should start taking Bitcoin on your website, and if you do, I'll buy some baklava." So he convinced me basically to take it, and he sent me the 14 Bitcoins it cost for a pan of baklava at the time.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the current value of Bitcoin right now
is about $205 a piece.
$220 on Mt. Gox right now.
Well, we don't count.
So you're doing pretty good on the bit.
Yeah, so that was pretty. Yeah, yeah. Looking back, but for me, it was just a way it made more sense. So the other way I was accepting payments was through PayPal, and PayPal has a lot of fees. They suck. So Bitcoin, I was like, wow, if I use BitPay, there's way less fees, and I could turn these into dollars and keep more of what I earn. So that's what it was initially. And then after a month or so, I was like, I could just keep these Bitcoins. They're actually pretty cool. But I learned more about it as I started accepting it. And that's why I see a lot of value in promoting it to brick and mortar stores, simply by saying there's less fee. You could turn this into dollars and there's going to be less fees than when taking credit cards, because there's 3.99% for some of these and up, depending on what kind of credit card you're taking. I think Amex is 6% or so. It's something crazy. But with Bitcoin, you use something like Coinbase or BitPay. They're very, very small to no fees, depending on your business. And
actually, there was a recent transaction where somebody moved at the time about $6 million worth of Bitcoins. And on that transaction, they paid something like 0.001 Bitcoins, which is about 6 cents.
Right.
So where else could you move $6 million?
I think that was just a general Bitcoin transaction, right?
Yes.
But even if you use like a transaction company, third party, to handle your transactions like BitPay or Coinbase, the fee you pay them for that service is still way less than you're paying these credit card companies. So you could get small businesses on board just from that, and then they could learn more about Bitcoin from there. You know, if they can decide eventually, like, oh, this is kind of cool, I think I'll hold on to these rather than selling them for dollars like I am now.
Yeah, Matthew, how did you get interested, first of all, in Bitcoin?
Well, it really spoke to me from a philosophical standpoint. I mean, there are a lot of technical reasons why, or, as a business person, business reasons why you would accept it, including, I don't know that you mentioned this, Mandrik, but there are no chargebacks either. You can't, once the transaction's gone through, no one can take it from you unless you willingly give it back to them. So from a business perspective, it's exciting in that way. But from a philosophical standpoint, as a libertarian, I know what the government does to the value of currency, of the dollar, and I know that the paper dollar is just this made up piece of crap at this point, and Bitcoin's not. It's not. You can't inflate it. It's not a central authority. So for freedom reasons, we chose to accept it.
Would you say you were interested in Austrian economics before finding out about Bitcoin?
That's just not my that's not my background. But as I learn more and more about that, then it makes connection points. Yes.
Gotcha. How about you, JJ? How did you find out about Bitcoins and get interested in them?
Well, I think when I found out about them being in the Liberty scene in Keene before I actually started using them. I think what it was is when I was managing the KAC 2 years ago, roughly. And so what happened is Free Talk Live had a lot of those Cassatius coins. And so those started to circulate amongst the community. And
Cassatius coins are physical representations of Bitcoins, where it's like a beautiful little token that has a Bitcoin private key on it. So you have the claim to some Bitcoin on a physical piece, just for people who aren't familiar.
Yeah, thank you. But we were also using silver a lot too. So, at the time we were interested in just using any alternative to the dollar, the ferns as some people refer to them. And so Bitcoin was natural. Yes, it's not a dollar. Well, let's learn about it a little bit. And all of a sudden it's like, yeah, I'll trade in that too. I'll sell you tacos or whatever for some Bitcoin. And at first it was just like Mandrik's baklava, where it was.
I remember selling gyros at the CAC for getting a Cassatius coin for one.
Yeah, exactly.
$5 sandwich.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it was a great experiment, and of course, being on Free Talk Live at the time as well, we talked about it a lot. So that was kind of the beginning for me.
Right. So I'm hearing a lot of reasons that people who are interested in liberty might also be interested in Bitcoin, because it allows you for some a greater degree of freedom in your business dealings, more control over, who's sort of influencing when you get paid and when you pay someone else. You're not sort of having this man in the middle with PayPal or credit card companies that you're dealing with. You're doing a transaction on a voluntary basis with another individual, right? And that's kind of what we all like.
I coined a term the other day. It reduces.
Really, you coined a term?
I did. It reduces your force footprint, right? So, like when you drive on the roads, you're kind of like, oh, I'm not saying you're supporting the government system, but you're using something that was created by the government, right? Like through their systems or whatever they have in place. So you're just pretty much circumventing everything, all their currency. Like you're not using their dollar, you're using Bitcoin. Okay, so maybe the internet network you're on, whatever, they pay taxes or whatever. But it's just a way to reduce that and from a Liberty's perspective, I mean, there's plenty of other reasons financially to use Bitcoin.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of those because we, I guess as people who are interested in Liberty, a lot of people who are in the Liberty world are also interested in job freedom, financial freedom, maybe self-employment, maybe starting their own businesses, entrepreneurship. And you all are entrepreneurs. You know, you all have your own businesses. And so how do you use Bitcoin in your business life? And how do you think that makes you more free if you do?
Well, at the club, we accept Bitcoin for membership. We accept Bitcoin for rent. In fact, Matt and Billy Rock, one of the tenants, or former tenants at the Quills lodging area, she wrote a blog post about this, and it actually got a lot of people excited about the prospects of paying rent in Bitcoin. But we also, I mean, we do as much as we can with Bitcoin. And personally, I mean, well, business-wise, obviously, with the podcast, Neocash Radio, we don't accept dollars for anything. If there's any sort of expenditures, we try to use Bitcoin as much as possible. There are exceptions. There are, like SoundCloud, for example, they want dollars. And some of these bigger sites, it's more difficult to try to negotiate with them and get them to accept Bitcoin. So you often end up looking for alternative vendors or vendors who aren't so well known or well established, because they're willing to try a different currency and they're willing to use this new currency. So it's a great way of finding out what else is in the marketplace from a business perspective, because you're resourcing vendors that you wouldn't normally look at because they're using a currency that you find more attractive and more efficient. And so then you can start building better relationships, because what ends up happening is these vendors typically don't have a lot of customers or clients for the most part. You know, like comparing, you know, the big box versus the mom and pop. And so you end up getting better service. You end up getting a more personal connection. And next thing you know, they're your friend. So I think Bitcoin in the business realm has also sort of benefited my personal life, in that I've made friends with some people who use it simply because they use it, and then naturally spreading talking about liberty from there. So bringing trade to a more personal level. Exactly.
It's funny how it's a digital currency, but yet I feel, you know, most of the transactions that we do in Bitcoin, I know them. And it's funny, I had a great experience with Mandrik a few days ago where we used blockchain to accept Bitcoin at the restaurant. But I don't remember all the details. He
had some type of issue and he wrote blockchain and I responded.
And Mandrik responds, and we'd never met in person, although I've known about him and saw him at PorkFest and stuff. But I was like, oh, hey, thanks for responding.
He didn't know
I was going to be on a panel with you.
You didn't know that I was going to be responding.
Yeah, that's cool, really cool. But anyway, there is
small incestuous world.
It is, but that's kind of a cool thing. How it's a digital currency, but yet it's more prominent it's pretty prominent in New Hampshire. So the people that you're dealing with who are using Bitcoin, a lot of times you know them. And I think with the whole chargeback aspect of it too, you have to build trust. Like with dollars can just kind of happen, but with Bitcoin, you have to build trust with your clientele. Like if you're going to accept it, you got to believe that or they have to believe you that you're going to give them this product. And if they give you your Bitcoin for it, you can't take it back from them. So they got to trust you. It creates more of a trust in the transaction, I think so.
You know, I'd like to share a quick experience I had at the Porcupine Freedom Festival this summer. I was purchasing a Italian soda at the, what was it called? The Revolution Coffee stand. They had a tent set up where the Lamassu machine was there. And I, was buying a cup of soda. It was $2. So at the time it was 0.02 Bitcoins. Well, I made a mistake and I sent them 0.2 Bitcoins. So I was paying $20 for a cup of soda. But since I knew them, I said, oh, hey, I screwed up. Could you send me back? And yeah, no problem. They sent me 0.18 back to my phone. And it was that easy. So yeah, I mean, there is an element of trust involved, but just knowing that you're using this kind of cool, like niche kind of alternative currency, perhaps you share some ideology with the person, so Definitely. It creates an instant bond. So I have a couple of questions about your restaurant in particular, Matthew. So like what percentage of your business would you say is in Bitcoin?
It's very small. I think, on the Seacoast, there are a lot of libertarians, but I would say that my experiences at Manchester is kind of a hub for Bitcoin. I think if we were located in Manchester, we would probably do a lot more physical physical business. So I would say, I mean, I could probably maybe total transactions since we started accepting is maybe 50.
Okay. So have you ever had anyone come in simply because they knew that you accepted Bitcoins at your business?
Yes, but they've also been a part of the Liberty Movement, or Free Staters at least, yeah.
Okay, so nobody that you didn't know yet, but maybe.
People that I didn't know, but were
peripherally related?
Yeah.
Okay. And Mandrik, so I'm curious about your Bitcoin business too, about not only what you do with Mandrik.com with your baklava,
right,
but also what you do with Blockchain.info, because right now, and you have said this publicly, you're making most of your income in Bitcoins.
Yeah, about 95. At this point, it's probably over 95, definitely over 95% of my income is in Bitcoin. So it's kind of this unique perspective, like this view I have, because most people right now that I talk to, they're collecting Bitcoins as a way to invest. I mean, they want it to succeed. Like, they want to be able to one day use Bitcoin for everything. But when that day comes, a lot of them are like, I want them to be worth $10,000 each. For me, that'd be cool if that happens. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'd love to have my own little floating island in space or whatever.
But you got to buy groceries.
Yeah,
right.
I'd be perfectly happy just being able to use Bitcoins that were worth $200 each or something in a world that they're accepted everywhere. That's ideal for me. That's the solution.
So, I mean, as Bitcoin history has progressed, I guess, has anything changed about how much you save versus how much you spend? I mean, are you...
Well, I'm a pretty frugal guy as it is. So whether I'm saving FRNs, in the past or now with Bitcoin, I'm still doing that. I still live well below my means. But
do you kind of say, "Oh crap," every time you have to spend some? Or
no, I don't at all. I don't. I've learned to not freak out when the price drops due to certain situations. Look, with Bitcoin, if you see it as the future of money, you're not gonna freak out when something like Silk Road bust happens and the price drops drastically for a day or so. You can use that as a selling opportunity. Maybe sell some and then buy some when it dips low. If you want to play that game, you can play that game. But I'm in it for the long haul. I see it for what it is. I see the potential behind it, and I know it's growing. Like, I would be amazed if it was just worth nothing tomorrow. I don't see that. It's just being widely accepted everywhere. Even some governments are coming on board with it. I see the U.S. being left behind because the U.S. is probably they come down pretty hard on U.S.-based exchanges or businesses. It's very difficult to do a large business exchange in the U.S., but other countries are like, yeah, whatever, just do your thing. Canada's pretty Bitcoin friendly. Germany, there's a lot of other countries.
Even China.
Yeah, even the Chinese government's just kind of like, okay. Do it. I mean, for Bitcoin to have grown as much as it has in China the past few months, that the government has to know what's going on, and they're just kind of waiting. A lot of governments are just taking a wait and see approach. So
a technical, I guess, sort of question for those who have businesses where some of your business is in Bitcoin. How do you manage the accounting? Or is it kind of so small that you're not really too worried about that yet?
Matt and I probably have a different approach. See, I don't pay taxes and I'm public about it, and I don't say I'm an activist because of that. It's just smart. Like, why would you pay if you look at normal people who get busted for tax evasion or whatever, the process is usually you either end up paying pennies on the dollar, settling, or you can leave the country before going to jail kind of situation. But there's a whole bunch that happens between then. So I'm just kind of like, well, if I one day have to settle for pennies on the dollar for some money, drag it through some court for some time, I'd rather do that than just be paying all this money up front. But obviously, when you own a brick and mortar, different story. You deal with a lot more crap with inspectors and everything. So for you, I'm interested too. I'm wondering how that is.
We avoid meals and rentals with Bitcoin.
Okay. So, I guess you've talked a little bit about how everybody uses Bitcoin for their business, but how do you use it maybe in more personal interactions? Like, do you go to Bitcoin meetups? Do you use it to form a social circle? Do you buy things and sell things with your friends with Bitcoin? And how does sort of being around a lot of other people who also use Bitcoin impact that?
Well, one other thing that to answer that last question, the club basically, because we do deal in ferns, silver, Bitcoin, gold. So Ofer is actually writing software to handle all of that. So the software is gonna take in how much silver, and it's gonna keep track of that stuff. So when you start using alternative currencies and you actually want to do accounting, you're kind of starting off at a blank sheet of paper in a way, and so having a software engineer to write this stuff for you is very helpful. But at the club, there's a lot of Bitcoin transactions that go on, whether it's for little food items, drinks. There's all kinds of ways that people want to spend it, and people are always looking forward to spending it. I think what I hear most consistently is, do you accept Bitcoin? And that's like the second thing people ask. Do you have product X that I desire? Will you use currency that I desire to use? And that's pretty much the order. And so I think, going to the meetups is great. It's in Manchester, the meetups are just outstanding. And I think... Can
you talk a little bit about Bitcoin meetups in New Hampshire? What is the social scene like for Bitcoin? Like, what is going on here?
Yeah. I mean,
nerds.
Not just Manchester, but I mean, all over the state, Bitcoin is not only bringing people together, but it's connecting people from outside the movement as well, outside the circles that we normally sort of swim in. Because, like, for example, local Bitcoin, meeting up with someone at the meetup.
I sold some Bitcoins to some guy through localbitcoins.com. And he was in Manchester, and I was heading out to the meetup at Strange Brew, and I was like, hey, just come on out and meet us up there. Guy comes out. He loved it. He had a great time. He just messaged me yesterday. He's like, hey, when's the next one? I want to come out again. He's not a free stater at all.
Right.
And a really cool guy. We had a really nice conversation.
But it's a great conversation starter. And I think that's getting your foot in the door with the social aspect of, you go to a bar and let's say you ask the waitress if they accept Bitcoin, and then you have a little conversation about it. And that sort of stuff is really wonderful because it's a very low-key liberty topic to get into.
Yeah, and just for those who are going to be hearing this on maybe a podcast, because we have a live audience here in this room, which is great, but this may go onto the internet too. So there is a pretty active Bitcoin social scene in New Hampshire, but not just in New Hampshire, like more in the Northeast in general is what I'm familiar with. We've got local Bitcoin meetups at least once a week here in New Hampshire and Manchester. Also in different parts, like in Boston, there's a fairly active Bitcoin scene. There's some restaurants in Boston that accept Bitcoin. There's some restaurants in New Hampshire that accept Bitcoin. And then, of course, the Free State Project is here, and we've got the Porcupine Freedom Festival in the summer, the Liberty Forum in the winter, and those are huge Bitcoin events as well. I mean, Bitcoin almost dominates those, just like at Money 2020, apparently it was really big. They're not specifically Bitcoin events, but a lot of people there are interested and excited about learning about Bitcoin, so they kind of become Bitcoin events by default. So if you're liberty curious at all, if you're interested in Bitcoin and you're like, oh, what's this liberty thing? Maybe one of those events might be something to consider coming out to sometime.
Yeah, the Manchester meetups every Sunday, right?
They've been changing it. Sometimes they do Saturday and sometimes Sunday because different people can come out on Saturday. So there's sort of
it's on a rotating schedule now.
Yeah, and there's sort of, obviously Facebook is a great resource, but there's a Facebook group that talks about this, and so it's sort of decided by committee or whatever.
Right. Now, on the other hand, I just mentioned all this stuff that's going on locally to do with Bitcoins in New Hampshire, but I'm going to play, a little devil's advocate here for a minute. Bitcoin is a truly global thing. I mean, a currency that you can send anywhere in the world, and a payment system, really, that you can send anywhere in the world and you can use to get more freedom in your life, no matter where you are. So the next question I want to ask is kind of a tough question, and that is, does Bitcoin obsolete the Free State Project? If you can use it to be free anywhere in the world, does it obsolete the Free State Project?
Someone talked to me about this, I think yesterday, the day before, and they said, does Bitcoin replace the Free State Project? And I went one bigger, and I said, no. My thing that I've been pushing is Bitcoin is the Ron Paul. Bitcoin replaces the person that spreads the message of liberty, being not a person, right? Not flawed by humanity, not So Bitcoin is one of the key talking points of liberty as far as I'm concerned. Does it replace it? No, because it's not getting people to move here. So that's a different subject.
Well, that's JJ's being technical. Okay. No, I see. I agree. Hey, I think the FSP is great. I moved here as part of the FSP. There's a lot of cool things. If you want to move or be around more like-minded people, if you want to get involved in certain types of activism, it's a great organization. If you're like me, I moved here because it's like, hey, I'm a business dude. I'm an agorist. I'm not really an activist. I'm not interested in going to jail, or I'm not saying if you're an activist, that means you're interested in going to jail, but I'm just saying, like, I want to avoid the state as much as possible. My main focus is financial freedom, and Bitcoin is financial freedom. It really is, and it's allowed me I want to make my income in Bitcoin, and I am there now, and that's really cool. It's what I want to be doing. It's really cool being around other like-minded people. I've been going to the meetups, the Bitcoin meetups lately. I've been trying to go out to Manch every weekend, and I go to the Keen one. It's a lot of fun. I love talking Bitcoin. There's a lot of cool people up here. But I kind of look at it like, I don't need to be living in New Hampshire anymore. Like, I don't need this necessarily. Like, it's not why I moved. Like I said, I liked working with other Liberty people because we could do financial transactions with each other outside of the government. But now I can do that with Bitcoin with anyone in the world. And it's amazing. It's mind-blowing. So I don't know. It's cool to have a home base. But for me, I could see myself traveling more in the future and using Bitcoin in other countries. Because like I said, U.S., I don't know. I think it's going to fall behind as far as Bitcoin use. It's going to be tougher in some ways. Obviously, I don't think they can really shut it down. The government they'll try to do some type of control, but I don't think it'll be very successful. But it's still going to make it difficult for things like exchanges. But other countries are going to fly way ahead, and I'd love to check it out. Check out the scenes there. But if you're someone who's interested in crossing international borders, try taking cash over a border. You'll be detained. Take your gold fortune across over the U.S. border either way. With Bitcoin, you can have a brain wallet, and you can remember 8 words, and you can have your Bitcoins anywhere in the world without taking anything physical. So, and as it grows, you'll be able to use it in other places more than just. I mean, right now I buy gift cards. A couple places that take Bitcoins. For gift cards, and that's kind of cool being able to, oh look, I bought this gift card for Walmart and now I can get gas at Sam's Club, and I did it with Bitcoin. That's pretty neat, but ideally I would rather just go to a gas station and pay it with Bitcoin, but a year ago you couldn't even do that. So this time next year, I don't know. I mean, it's going to be pretty huge, I think.
I don't know if anybody else owns a business here, but it's extremely easy to accept Bitcoin, and the more people that do, the better. So I hope we might be the only restaurant in New Hampshire that accepts. Does anybody know of any other? No, there's that Vertical Dreams. Is the climbing gym? Climbing gym. So very important if you own a restaurant. So if somebody's listening to this, maybe on a podcast or in the audience, how would they go about doing that if they have a business and they want to start accepting Bitcoins, but they're not sure where to begin? Set up a wallet, Blockchain.info, and set up a wallet. It's very easy. Thanks for the plug. Yeah, no, you got it. And then when somebody wants to pay with Bitcoin, you basically just show them a QR code of your Bitcoin address. Yeah, so right near our we don't have a physical register, but right near our register, we've got our QR code posted. When someone comes in and they say, okay, we want to order this, we have a little app that converts Bitcoin to dollars to Bitcoin. We say, okay, so this is $10 worth of merchandise. Plug 10 in, it shows us how much Bitcoin that you would owe. Flip it around so they can see. They put that denomination of Bitcoin in, scan our QR code, and in a few seconds we see that the transaction has gone. Yeah, and there's also point of sale systems that integrate Bitcoin. There's one that was just announced a week ago, and I can't. Soft touch. But then you have to share that with the state. So right, and BitPay also has an integrated POS system that works on a tablet. So, and there's more to come. Like the transaction, we handled about 185 Bitcoin transactions at PorcFest this year. It's still kind of a little slow as far as it's kind of clunky, like people just getting their phones out and scanning this code and doing this thing. It's not like where credit cards are, but it's going to get there. It's going to be easier. It's just going to take some time. Did you use an integrated POS, or you just use the QR? We had a POS system for other orders to take the orders, print out receipts and stuff, but we just had a QR code. I actually just had we had a dual monitor setup, and on the second monitor facing the customers, it just had the QR code with the blockchain wallet, so they could see an unconfirmed transaction when it went through. Along with a snarky message. Yeah, at times, yeah.
All right, so at this point, I think we're going to open it up to some questions from the audience. It looks like some people have questions here. So go ahead.
So my question is related to Bitcoin security. I really like the idea of Bitcoins, and I'd like to have some in the future. But say hypothetically, someone like the NSA or the CIA or some independent super hacker decides to hack into the entire Bitcoin network and destroy all the Bitcoins in the world. Is there any risk for that? Is there any risk of any government coming down onto Bitcoin and just wiping out the entire network?
Rephrase that question and replace Bitcoin with internet. That's kind of where it's at right now. Like, would that make sense?
Yeah,
like,
yeah. I'm
just saying, think of the possibility of that. Like, could somebody come in and just like destroy the whole internet kind of thing? And I guess there's some like I don't know, like some insane scenario where there's these worldwide EMP blasts that destroys all electronic kind of stuff. I think if something like that were to happen, the way it would happen, we'd have a lot of other things to worry about. Like,
well, right now the network is hashing at 4,156 terahashes. So someone would have to put out
that's the amount of computing power in the Bitcoin network.
Yeah, the network is hashing this to solve the next block at this power rate per second. So someone would have to create the next block, a false block in which they steal Bitcoins, and even then they can only have a limited number of transactions in that block, but they would have to put out over 2,000 terahashes of power, and right now that is near impossible with the supercomputers and their limited capacities. You'd pretty much have to hijack the network, like all the individual computers.
Right, it doesn't exist on a server. It exists on everybody, on millions
just like
of
the internet,
computers.
Right. And then with what JJ is saying, this scenario, and then you would have to be able to react to the market's response to that. And as we've seen in the past, when something happens with Bitcoin, like when we had that fork back in March or whatever, I think it was, or was it May? Or
I think it was May.
You meant May? The reaction, like if you think the issue was resolved so fast because all these people have an interest in making sure it works. Whereas with something happens with the government, the people getting paid to fix it, they don't really care. And
yes.
And they went back to a different block.
Right.
So they realized that this block is bad, and the community, everybody as individual users, decided that, okay, we're going to go back to this block and restart and fix this flaw that caused this error. But at the same time, even if you have all that hashing power, you still have to win that block reward. You still have to be the one that gets that correct answer. And even with 51% of the power, you still have a 49% chance of not getting it. So
just for people who aren't really familiar with some of these terms, what we're talking about is the theoretical risk of something called a 51% attack, where some entity like the government or some other, maybe a group of hackers or a botnet or something, gets 51% of the network power on the Bitcoin network and then uses it to create a record that says, no, actually, we own all the Bitcoins. And that is incredibly unlikely. I saw that there was an infographic just a couple months ago that came out that said, in order for someone to do that, it basically takes like way more than the military budget of most countries in the world. So it's very unlikely.
Okay, and I've one more follow-up question. What solutions are there for me as an individual to secure my Bitcoin wallet?
Great question.
I think security is the number one thing. Security is the number one thing. I mean, it's still kind of the Wild West out there, and I've helped people recover funds from a wallet maybe where they kind of lost certain information, but they still had the password, and I was able to help. And that's awesome. Like, that's great to be able to get people reconnected with their money that they thought they lost. But I also see issues where people have their money stolen because they use very limited they use small passwords. They use just easily hackable wallets in some ways. So really, it's all about it depends on what type of wallet you're using. I promote Blockchain.info, but I'm not like this guy that's like, no, that's all you should use. You should always keep an open mind. You should study all the different types of ways to store Bitcoins, and don't use anything you don't feel comfortable with. If you use something like Blockchain.info, have two-factor authentication enabled. You can get Google Authenticator on a smartphone or a tablet. They have YubiKeys. I have one in my pocket out somewhere. They have these little USB keys that your computer recognizes as a keyboard, and there's lots of different ways to have security. Hardware wallets are on their way next year. They're going to be pretty interesting to see.
A hardware wallet is like a device that you can store the Bitcoins on. That's not a computer that can get viruses and malware and stuff, right?
Right, and the way the backups are done is that you could actually restore a backup through the online server. It's kind of some technical stuff in there, but there's a lot of things coming out that you'll be able to secure your wallet better. But I would encourage people to really look into security. Like, as long as you have security set up properly on a wallet, whatever you use, you can kind of figure out, like, that's the first thing you should really learn about, in my opinion.
So encrypt a wallet, strong passwords, don't use the same password for everything on the internet.
Two-factor authentication for online wallets, for sure. For anything that has two-factor authentication.
Hardware wallets, perhaps. Yeah. So those are all some ideas. Anybody else?
Well, the only other thing is to have more than one wallet. I mean, if you're dealing with a lot of Bitcoins, you're going to want to consider that the device you have your Bitcoins on is just as the wallet you have in your pocket. So if that wallet gets stolen and someone is able to get into that device and get through your password, if it's encrypted, they can gain access to that. At the same time, you don't put all your money in your wallet when you go walking around town. You keep some of your money in whatever security situation you have, whether it's your bank or it's your mattress or your lockbox at home. And so you follow that same thing with Bitcoin. You be smart about it, and you keep your mind on your money, and you make
your money on your mind.
and your Bitcoin on your mind, I guess. Let's say it that way. But you make the smart decisions. It's all about personal responsibility. I mean, Bitcoin removes the nanny state from your life as far as money is concerned, and that means that you are responsible, and if you screw up, you will lose.
Yeah, that's scary as hell.
Yeah.
when you're responsible for everything like that, that's
so that it's just, there's a lot out there. There's a lot of information. There's paper wallets. There's wallets that you can have a computer that's not even connected to the internet, put inside a vault inside of your house. I mean, there's ridiculous layers you can put into it. It all depends upon how much risk you're actually leveraging.
All right, let's have our next question from the audience.
Do any of you think that crowdfunding can be used by the Bitcoin community to produce a 30-second television commercial with Bitcoin 101 compressed into those 30 seconds, perhaps with a plot of Bitcoin price since 2009 on a logarithmic scale, and have entities like Blockchain and Bitcoin Not Bombs and so forth contribute to that, and whereby the motivation will be partly selfish greed with the possibility of your investment skyrocketing, and also the altruism of eroding the state?
I would make a public pledge to voice over it at no charge, to narrate it.
Oh, of course. You have a good voice.
Thank you. So anybody crowdfunding?
I mean, this just seems very U.S.-centric type stuff going on, and I think the United States is actually one of the crappiest places for Bitcoin at the moment. In fact, China puts out 26-minute documentaries on Bitcoin on state television, and the Chinese Bitcoin market is just skyrocketing now, where if you want to arbitrage your dollars to Bitcoin to yuan, yeah, you're going to actually make money, and you can do that all day long and just make money because they're paying more for Bitcoin in China. They're also paying more for Bitcoin in Brazil. In fact, Bitcoin is a lot more successful outside the United States than here because the dollar to Bitcoin pinch point, where the federal government is getting their panties in a bundle over the loss of power as their grasp on the people in this area slips through their fingers like so many Bitcoins.
If I could interject, I would argue that if we raise the 4 million or so FRNs to do, say, the Super Bowl, and Joe Sixpack knows what Bitcoin is in this country, then Joe Sixpack in other countries will likely know it too.
It's not a soft drink. It's not. There's more to Bitcoin than just a 30-second ad on television. And while I like this, dude, it's a great idea. I just don't think it's worth that money.
But I'm saying Joe Sixpack is motivated by greed.
I don't think it's worth the money. Regardless. I don't.
Maybe you could start it. Maybe
I don't think it's worth.
Bitcoin starter.
The answer is no.
Joe Sixpack, I think right now, if he were to look at Bitcoin, he would be like, I don't know what the hell this is. Even after the 30-second ad, and he goes to look further into it. Like, Bitcoin's like where email was when your grandma was like, like, it's not at that point yet where.
Put it on a NASCAR.
Yeah, there you go. That's my answer. Put it on escrow.
Well, it took me a few times, right? Did it take you a few times to like kind of let it sink in?
I just started accepting it because I was like, oh, less fees than PayPal, cool. And then the months as I learned more about it, I was just like, oh, okay, this actually is better than, I actually like this more now than getting paid in dollars and silver and whatever.
What it took for me was having someone I already knew who personally gave me an introduction to it. So I don't know. I'm not sure if that's the answer, but you could try it. There's Bitcoin Starter. There's some other websites.
Who still watches? I'm just wondering who still watches commercials. I mean, the Tech Panel, torrents. Come on.
I would argue that the what would really hook people would be the logarithmic scale, where they would see 2009. It's well under 1 cent, and the over 10,000-fold, 20,000-fold increase.
Right, but the problem with that I see is that then people get on board because they're like, oh, get rich quick scheme. Like a lot of people say that that's what Bitcoin is, and a lot of people lost a lot of money back in April when Bitcoin went down because they were just getting on board because they're like, oh, it's going to double in price in a couple months. I'm gonna make all this money, but I don't look at Bitcoin as this get rich quick scheme. Like I said, it could stabilize at 200 for the next 10 years. Of course, that's not possible for it to be successful. That it's not going to happen. But I'm just saying, like, Bitcoin isn't about just getting rich, getting it now so you can get rich. It's going to be a bumpy ride. If you're going to get on board, you better just hold on because there's a lot of craziness.
And people who get on board for that reason, once they get burned, they're going to hate it. And we don't want that at all. We want them to understand the fundamentals first, or at least from my perspective, I want them to understand why.
Yeah, if you
start using it.
If you want to make a lot of money off of Bitcoin in a few years, buying now, don't just ignore Bitcoin then. Just buy Bitcoin and don't even look at the price.
Lots of really interesting ideas about mainstream adoption of Bitcoin. I do want to get 3 more questions in from the audience. So we got 3 more. Go ahead.
Okay. My question is more or less how would I get started? I'm a person who doesn't have a smartphone, doesn't have a laptop, doesn't really own a computer, and doesn't have. I have access to the internet, but it's not through my own means. So what are the terms of use, like the unofficial ones? Like, what do I need to actually do it? And is there like a device or like a debit card type thing or something which I could have to just store them and then use them?
Well, that's what I was wondering. What do you want Bitcoin for? Do you want to just hold on to them, or are you looking to use it to spend? Or
yes and yes. I mean, just to hold on to as if I was pretending it was gold, because it is sort of. Or to have so that if I have an opportunity to spend it at, say, one of your businesses, because I want to go to a restaurant or whatever, then I could.
Well, you can actually print out a paper wallet. And I think that would be actually, if you have no electronic devices, but you have access to the internet, you can actually create a wallet where it's a piece of paper. There's a QR code on the left with your public key that you'd give out to people, if to receive payments. And then it would also have your private key with the QR code. So if you want to send funds, you have one there? Is that what? Yeah.
We've got a real paper wallet in the audience.
The public key is here, the private key is in here.
And then, so if there's certain apps where if you want to send from a paper wallet, like the Android app for Blockchain.info, you can scan the private key anytime you go to send, but you wouldn't have to actually have that on inside the wallet itself.
If you don't have a smartphone, but you have a dumb phone or a regular cell phone, there are also ways to send Bitcoin by SMS. So there's Coinapult, and the company that does M-Pesa. It's not really in the U.S., but they're also developing ways to send Bitcoin by SMS as well.
Do I need anything more advanced than a track phone? Is that a
for
yes?
that?
No,
I don't think so.
If it can do SMS, you can do that.
Yeah, and you could still go to like blockchain.info, set up your wallet online, have the backup sent to your email address if you wish, and then you can just anytime you get to the internet from wherever you are, you can access that wallet, and pretty much you'll have a wallet that's basically on the internet.
Oh, another thing you could do is the Casacious physical Bitcoins that we mentioned before, which is a physical token with basically a claim to Bitcoin on it. So that you don't have to be connected.
They're sold
to the
at a
internet
premium,
at
but
all.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
That's
it's a little more expensive, but you can get them.
But like for someone like my mom's interested in Bitcoin, just like because she sees how excited I am about it. She's like, oh, I just want to get some, give you some money here and there to buy some, just money that I don't mind losing, that I can live without if Bitcoin goes to nothing. And for her, I just made a paper wallet and I just send the funds there, and I gave her that piece of paper to her and told her to secure it because it's basically like holding cash. So for someone who doesn't want to spend it and doesn't really want to understand, it's because it can be pretty complicated still.
Yeah.
But that's a good way for.
Great question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Next question.
There's been an argument. I'm kind of like to get your perspective on this. The argument's been that, as soon as we get quantum computers coming out there, they're going to break the cryptography and all the Bitcoins are going to go to zero. But I read something last week that I found a bit interesting. With every Bitcoin address, there's a private key which you keep. There's a public key which is used when you spin the Bitcoins and only when you spin the Bitcoins. And your Bitcoin address is actually a hash of your public key. So as long as you use wallets which use change addresses, your public key never goes on the blockchain until you spin the Bitcoin. And therefore, because the only thing on the blockchain with your address is your Bitcoin address, and it's a hash of your public key, the story goes that quantum computers can't break that hash. So it would be immune to quantum computing. And I'm wondering if you've heard anything about this, because I just heard about it a couple of days ago.
I know I read that same article.
I read that same article, yeah.
It was probably posted in that Free State group, I think.
The only thing I've read relating to this that's different is an article about where quantum computers are right now and how efficient they've become. And I think the latest one that I saw was something like it's not capable, it's not fast enough yet. But I think they're capable within the next year of doing the 256, breaking 256, I think, SHA. And but by then there could be 512, right? That's the beauty of Bitcoin, is that the software is upgradable, the wallets are upgradable. The software can always be changed and made better, and it's never made better by fiat. It's always made better by individuals deciding, I'm going to change the software on my miner or my hard drive or my device. And so I think Kevin Freehart has this quote that I use all the time, and he says, hackers write code faster than legislators write law. And I think that's true in so many ways for Bitcoin, and more than just legislators. Obviously, the NSA that gets funded by those legislators. But I think the community is very much aware of what's going on, and their self-interest at holding on to the wealth that they've gathered and the strength they have in that currency is going to drive better and better.
The market response to things like that is just incredible with Bitcoin.
Couldn't quantum computing be used to secure the Bitcoin network just as it could be used to potentially attack it?
It's a good thought.
Well, I mean, it's sort of like the issue is that the quantum computers are very difficult because you have to cool the processor down, right? You have to basically bathe it in liquid hydrogen. Or liquid hydrogen, or nitrogen, yeah. And it's expensive. So that's why pretty much only huge corporations or governments are capable of building quantum computers. So there's sort of a barrier to entry with that.
And final question.
Questions. Two.
Questions.
And the first one is, you've both referred to Bitcoins as currency and money. And there is a difference between the two. Was referring to it as money a misstatement?
I don't refer to it as money, but I'm on the fence either way.
I've never really thought about that.
I call it personally. I call it a digital currency.
I typically use the word currency, but in conversation, money might slip out just as I'm just used to referring to something I exchange for a product as money.
Okay.
But
it's
the intrinsic value argument.
Right,
with money.
Right. Okay. And my other question is convertibility into other currencies, FRNs or whatever. How difficult is that?
You got a smartphone, you can buy some right now from me. That's how easy it is.
Well, no, I'm talking about larger quantities. For example, you talked about moving money overseas, and I suspect that when the crap hits the fan, a lot of people will be looking for a way to get overseas. And obviously, the borders will be shut down. The means of transporting money will be shut down. So how would you be able to move a large amount of money via Bitcoin unless you had vendors in multiple countries that were able to convert to the local currencies? Is that infrastructure in place?
Well, the point is not to use the local currencies. The point is to use Bitcoin in those other countries, because many other countries do accept Bitcoin, so you wouldn't even have to worry about that. You could travel anywhere. I could get on a plane, go pretty much any major city in the world and use Bitcoin.
There's always local, kind of peer-to-peer exchanges like local Bitcoins. So for instance, if you wanted to move from the US to Argentina, let's say, and you hopped on a plane, you brought your laptop, you had your Bitcoins on there, or you had them in a web wallet, you didn't even have to bring your laptop. You get to Argentina and you need to buy some food. Okay, well, you can go meet someone through Local Bitcoins, the website, and convert your Bitcoins into the local currency. Or you could maybe just use your Bitcoins directly to buy some food or whatever else you needed. It really depends because, one of the pressure points, and this is a really great point that you raised, one of the pressure points is that governments are going to try to exploit is on the exchanges that exchange Bitcoin into fiat and vice versa. So if we can get around exchanges by either trading locally with just individuals or perhaps going to countries, maybe doing some geo arbitrage or kind of going to countries where they're more friendly to Bitcoin exchanges, then that could probably work just fine.
Okay, thanks.
The other part too is converting dollars to Bitcoin right now is not the easiest thing unless unless it's peer to peer. So if you wanted to transact a large quantity of dollars to Bitcoin, it might if it's like $10,000 into Bitcoin, it might be kind of difficult to do with our community. But to plug Lamassu, that machine is for that particular thing. You can, Lamasu's, it's a Bitcoin machine, not an ATM, I guess, right?
Bitcoin vending machine.
Thank you.
Great.
It's amazing. You shove in dollars and it sends you Bitcoin. It's amazing. It's wonderful. I used it at Pork Fest. It was instant. It was so fast and slick. I loved it. There you go.
One follow-up to what you were saying or your question. I know there's stories, I'll be brief, but there's stories about people going to other countries from obviously the United States or wherever. It doesn't really matter. But they arrange things through local Bitcoin and other sort of meetup sites where as soon as they get to the airport, there's someone waiting to buy the Bitcoins off of them with local currency that they'll need. And you don't need to carry, you're not going to cash out $1 million worth of currency.
Just cash on hand for that trip.
Yeah, you cash out what you need to spend, so you don't have a lot of risk in your pocket. And and in fact, if you go to places like Venezuela, you're going to get more currency for your Bitcoin because they want Bitcoins bad, and so the demand is so great, and the scarcity is what it is at a very metered rate, and you're going to get more bang for your buck.
Yeah, I just read a story. Sorry, I just read a story on Reddit where a guy posted like, "Emergency! I lost my wallet at the airport, and now I'm flying to like Switzerland or something." He was a U.S. guy, and he was just like, "I got some Bitcoins I can sell," and it's like, "I lost my wallet, and I need some money so I can get some stuff." And he managed to work it all out. I think the Reddit community helped with in some way. It was pretty cool though. I just saw it posted yesterday.
Cool. All right. Well, does anybody have any final thoughts? I think we're going to end off the panel here soon.
Stop using dollars.
Use Bitcoin.
Thanks, Ian.
Yeah, thanks, Ian.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mandrik, Matthew, JJ. Great panel. And thanks, Ian.
Good job. Thank you. So informative, useful information. And of course, Keen Bitcoin Network will be meeting up this afternoon at 5:30 at McHugh's. I imagine some of our Bitcoin panel may be in attendance there, so be sure to come on out. If they're not there, there'll be all kinds of Bitcoin-related people.
We'd like to invite you to visit freekeen.com. Freekeen.com features audio, video, and blogs chronicling the transition to a voluntary society. Freekeen.com also has comments and discussion forums so you can be heard. Freekeen.com.
I should be in Keene, New Hampshire with the Free Staters.